Welcome to Heart Space Podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Anna.
And I'm Candice. This is a podcast dedicated to all things heart-centered. In each episode, we will open our heart space to share embodied experiences, simple tips, and thoughtful prompts for you to live a heart-centered life.
If you are curious about the wisdom of our hearts, if you are ready to embrace deep transformation, this podcast is for you.
Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss any episodes.
From our hearts to yours, Anna and Candice.
Hello, welcome back to episode 2. We just want to check in with you today. How is your heart right now? Not your physical heart, but the seat of the self. And also perhaps to inquire within, how's the mind right now? Is it clear, calm, centered, or is it all over the place? And what is the relationship between your heart and the mind? The last episode, we talked about the heart, and today we are talking about the mind. The mind gives us a sense of who we are, our identity, and the mind is also where the ego resides. In this episode, we are explaining the purpose of the mind and the ego, debunking some myths and misconceptions about the ego, and how we can lead a simpler, more heart-centered life with the help of our minds. But before we start, we want to send a big thank you to all of you who reached out to us on Instagram and in person for your feedback, reflections, and kind words for the last episode. We know it stirred some deeper self-inquiry, so thank you for sharing with us your journey. We are here to support you, and always remember to be patient with yourself.
Absolutely. And speaking of self-inquiry, we also held our first heart-centered community gathering in Singapore a couple of weeks ago. And we really want to send a big thank you to all of you who joined us. This is really the reason why Heart Space came to life, to bring together a community in which we can be ourselves, where everyone and everything is welcome, all our emotions, all thoughts, all experiences and reflections, where we hold each other as we take our time to individually inquire back into the self. So thank you for celebrating and sharing with us your beautiful heart spaces. We will be holding such gatherings regularly, and we will keep you posted on the next one, likely happening in the next quarter of this year.
That's right. In the meantime, you can join our full moon virtual gathering in June. So be sure to join our mailing list if you haven't already, and you will be the first to know once registration for June's full moon gathering is opened. And last but not least, if you enjoy our podcast, please make sure to share it with your friends and drop us a review, give us a star rating. This really helps us to grow the Heart Space community.
Yeah, and coming back to today's main topic, when we are asked, where is our mind? We often associate our mind with our brains, right? And our brain is a very complex organ, but it is not our mind. The mind gives us the ability to think, to feel, to engage in physical activity, while the brain refers to that complex physical organ in our head that supports these functions. And we may think that the mind is located in the brain, but the truth is that the mind is beyond our physical body. Every single cell in the body has its own intelligence. Our mind exists all across and accumulates information and knowledge. And memories are not only in our brain or in the head. The body has its own memory. Every cell has its own memory. Other words that are commonly used to call the mind are psyche, intellect, or consciousness. So in that case, we can visualize the brain and our physical body as a layer of the self, and the mind as another layer of the self, a way more subtle layer that is beyond our physical body.
So we have established the differentiation between the mind and the body. The mind is part of a mental or subtle layer, and our body is the physical matter that allows us to engage in physical activity. Beyond the mind, there is another layer, or you could call it the most inner layer that is called pure consciousness. So think of pure consciousness as a spotless mirror. The mind or the mental layer is the recognition that we are a reflection standing in front of this spotless mirror. That is our intellect. That is also the receiver of impressions, of motor sensory skills, emotions, etc. Whereas the body is the physical matter that is standing in front of the mirror, and the body helps us to see what is existing in front of us, the reflection. And our body helps us to physically interact with the world and experience life. So all three aspects are interconnected and must work together for us to know who we really are, our potential, our infinite creativity, our innate essence of existence.
And then back to the example of the mirror, the person that we look at in that spotless mirror and identify with, that is called the sense of self or our individual ego. In Sanskrit, it is called ahamkara, and it is the ability of the mind to take on identities, to make things me or mine. And it gives us this will and meaning to interact in the world also. So along the way, this mirror gets stained, or we actually just think that the mirror is stained. And we begin to identify these spots on the mirror as parts of ourselves, because this is what we see in the reflection, right? So the result is a creation of our false ego self. And the false ego self arises when we become identified with all of those transient aspects of our existence. And that is our roles, our possessions, our achievements, right? And then it is further fueled by desires, by fear. And these desires and fears actually are the result of all of these roles and possessions that we start identifying ourselves with. And then there is also the constant need for validation and for control, also the effect of identifying with roles and possessions. And all of that, all of this new layer is formed through identification with the thoughts, with all of these attachments that form over here. And this is also this illusion of being separate from everyone else. So then we collect all of these impressions in our mind. Unfortunately, very often these impressions are negative, and they become part of our psyche. And we start identifying with, and we start attaching to these thoughts. And at the end, the spotless mirror is now stained. And we identify our reflection and the stains as ours, as me. So remember when we mentioned that the physical body, the mental layer, and the pure consciousness are interconnected, right? That's why it is important to remember that our physical body will always reflect our mind. So let's go into some examples. For instance, when we lack confidence, we tend to hunch or slouch. This is one way that it can show up in the body. And our voice may soften. And we don't allow ourselves maybe to be seen or heard. We simply want to hide in the background because that's what our mind tells us. We are not good enough. Nobody wants to hear your opinion, or your presence is insignificant. And then another scenario when we are angry, right? Our breath tends to get shallow. We feel our heart racing. We feel heat within our body. And then the body shows signs of dysregulation. The mind receives the information that there is anger in the body. And now we identify the anger as us. The ego self will claim the anger to be mine and start identifying with the anger, maybe even lashing out at others. So this is how certain emotions, but also identifications start showing up, not only in our minds, but actually through our behavior, showing up in the way we are, in the way we hold ourselves, the way our body is. And all of that creates a negative feedback loop of a misidentified self, the false ego.
So I believe at some point in our life, or perhaps when we are unconscious, we tend to fall into this space of leading our life as this false ego. And it is commonly presented due to societal pressure and our modern interpretation of productivity and time, and also tying it to our self-worth. So here are some examples of how the false ego plays out in our life. Firstly, like I mentioned about tying it to our sense of self-worth. So we think that by producing work, by giving qualitative results at our job, it means that we are a good person, that we are productive, we are helpful, we are useful, and it provides a sense of identity to ourselves. However, because of that, we lose the initial intention of why are we doing a job? Is our job fulfilling our core essence? Is our job being true to what we are called to do in this time, within this lifetime? So just the idea of producing does not mean that our ego is in the right place. The second example of society's pressure would be something that is very common, such as reaching milestones in life by a certain age. You would hear many people, relatives, parents, or even just in general, the media telling you that you need to get a certain job, a certain amount of pay by X age, and you need to get married, you need to get promotion, you need to now start to have a family and have kids. All this pressure that is given by external forces, by information that is derived from what you received and then internalize, it ties a lot back into this negative feedback loop of the false ego when we tie our self-worth to time, the pressure of getting things done by a certain amount of time.
Yeah, and then what's happening is that because of the false ego, we become obsessed with maintaining a certain image of ourselves. It's no longer, the expression of our true soul, of our nature, but a deep identification, such as attachment to a job or to a particular role in a relationship that we want to maintain. The false ego is a very tricky thing, actually, because it's hiding within ourselves, and it can disguise itself as our thoughts, our feelings, deceiving us into believing that we are our ego. And it can lead us to prioritize the preservation of our perfect image above everything else. And it can cause harm to others, to ourselves, because people will often lie or cheat or even harm others to protect their false ego. And then any kind of criticism can also be taken very personally, because the ego will see it as an attack on your entire identity, on yourself. So you can think for a moment, how do you describe yourself to others? How much of this description is tied up to your job, to your title or company that you work in, to other roles that you play? And when someone criticizes your work, your performance in any of these roles, how much of it affects you? So just some food for thought. How much of your identity is what you do or who you think you are?
Yeah, we can take a moment to think about it, or perhaps even just contemplating about this on your journal when you have the time to do so. So we're not trying to tell you that you have to strip off your ego completely, because ego is not bad. It's not the villain here. You are unique. Each one of us is unique. And ahamkara, that is our ego self, allows us to experience life. So it is very important to embrace our ego and be truly ourselves, but also notice what is us, what is the self, and what is not really you. So where do this person ends, and where from that ending, the false identification starts to come in and adds on into the negative loop. So we want to understand the concept that we are infinitely more than this ego, or rather this false ego by which we define ourselves. You can start by noticing everything that you think you are, all the roles that you fulfill, all the beliefs that you hold. Are these roles and beliefs who you really are? Or are they just the false ego that is taking on a joyride? So here's an invitation for you to contemplate on the question, who am I? You don't have to contemplate it right now, but at your own time, find a quiet moment and conducive space to just think about this question and marinate in the thought of who am I? And what could also help to continue with this journey of contemplation is, what do I want? How can I serve? And what am I grateful for?
Yeah, earlier we used a metaphor of a mirror, and now I wanted to offer another one. Imagine a lake, and then throw into that lake all your identities, all your beliefs, everything that you think you are. These identities will stay on the surface. They will create a ripple, and maybe some of them will start sinking a little bit deeper. They will start creating a new layer in the lake, covering the true depth of our being, the true depth of the lake. And what we want to do is to look beyond all of these identities. We want to dive into the depth of our being and want to discover the true essence of who we are, not through all of these identities, but at the very core. We need to realize and remember that our false identities are very superficial and they are changing. They are never stable. And when we realize that, we can then begin to let go of some of them. We can start admitting that they don't define us, that the job doesn't define us, that no label can actually define us.
Yes, no label can define us because we need to recognize that we are just pure consciousness. Beyond the mind and the body, we are eternal pure consciousness. So when we share about the physical body, the mental or subtle layer, those are just manifestations, material manifestations to help us to experience the world. And in the path of yoga and Ayurveda, which I are deeply embedded in and grateful for, it is derived from an Indian philosophy called Sankhya. So Sankhya explains what is pure consciousness and what is this material form very beautifully. And it's a simple philosophy for us to manage our time and understand our purpose in this world. So we're going to share just a little bit about Sankhya here. Sankhya divides everything that is in this world into two fundamental principles. One is the conscious principle that is called Purusha, and the other one is the material principle called Prakriti. So in this context, we are talking about conscious principle being this pure consciousness that is eternal, and the material principle that is our physical body, the mental layer, our ego, our thoughts, our emotions, all of that are this material principle called Prakriti. So we are the eternal witness of all these things in life that is beyond time and space. So that is why we shouldn't label or actually even define ourselves as our emotions, as our thoughts, as our occupation, as our role in life. The goal here is to witness our ahamkara, our ego self, and try to be the observer of all that we are experiencing in life, the labels that we put on roles, the emotions, the identities, and not associate it, because we know that we are pure consciousness and that is our true nature. In this way, it can help us to interact in the world at our fullest potential as our joyful and blissful self, and to simplify our lives by looking in this mirror, this spotless mirror, or looking at the surface of the lake and recognizing the stains or the ripples, but not claiming it as ours. The power to discern and know our true self from all that clutter, all that fog, all that stain, that is the path of yoga, and Sankhya explains it very nicely. So we will try to create another episode to share more about Sankhya and hopefully discuss it in a deeper form and relate it back to how we can live life simply and also live life with our fullest and deepest intention, and also perhaps invite our teachers to come on to share their wisdom with us.
Yeah, and talking about simplifying our lives, one of the many beautiful aspects of returning to who we truly are and embodying this interconnectedness of all things is how simple everything becomes. So the more the false ego dissolves away, meaning the less we base our identity on the beliefs and identities of the false ego, the more we see what is necessary for our lives and what is not. We still play this role, we still act in this society, but we don't identify ourselves so deeply with these roles that we play. So I believe that modern life becomes exceedingly complicated nowadays. There is pressure of all kinds that Candice explained before, gave a few examples. And this pressure can be to succeed in a relationship, to succeed in a job. There is stress, there is struggle to fulfill all of these expectations. And all of that can be pretty exhausting. But when we return to the core, to the essence of life, the miracle of life, to the interconnectedness of all things, then we realize that life is pretty simple, actually. Life really becomes simpler because we let go of the external clutter, let go of the noise in our lives. We can also let go of the false identities that we have created for ourselves. So we suddenly start having this need, for example, to let go of unnecessary possessions, unnecessary commitments, things that we thought that we want to do, but in reality, they are just a result of identifying with a certain role. We start letting go of some distractions, and we create space, we create stillness within ourselves, allowing us to connect with our true nature. And then as a result, we start recognizing that the joy is already within us. We don't have to seek it in all of these achievements. We start acting with intention. We start making more meaningful decisions for ourselves.
Yes, and not just for ourselves, right? We also have this ripple effect when we simplify our lives. Everything else within us, around us, the relationships, duties, and path in our life, it also have this ripple effect of receiving what you have accepted yourself for. And when we let go of the unnecessary clutter in our lives, we are able to better focus on the things that truly matter, including our relationship with others. So meaning that we can confidently and very openly let go of toxic connections, and being true to ourselves, we can decide between holding on to attachments of regret, of hurt, of anger, or should we want to choose to let go of all of that and cultivate more meaningful connections with those who will uplift and inspire us. So simplifying our duties also allow us to prioritize the things that align with our Dharma, which is our path, and continue to contribute to our personal growth and fulfillment. So ultimately, it can help us to contribute to the world in a more meaningful way by focusing on our inner self, our inner essence, and letting go of all the superficial layers. And we can show up authentically and make a positive impact on the world around us. So we're quickly coming to the end of the episode, and we would like to share with you 3 tips on how to release the false ego. Firstly, is to use our subtle mental layer, which is our mind, our ego, as well as our physical body, for the purpose of experiencing life fully and wholly, and recognizing that beyond all of that, we are pure consciousness. So we want to stay connected with our true self, which is the pure consciousness, and try to be the observer and detach ourselves from everything else, and also to detach ourselves from expectations from ourselves and others. So if we could give an example, it would be the purpose of a yoga asana practice, a movement practice. It is to help to balance our body, the elements within our body. And when it's in balance, then we could move to the state of concentration to quieten down the mind, that is the subtle or mental layer. And with this guided contemplation, or even just being able to sit quietly and silently with yourself, we can slowly clear away all of the fog, all of the noises within our heads, and dive deeper into the self, into this pure consciousness. And secondly, the second tip is to understand that the world is working for us and never against us. So think of the world, be it the people, be it nature, be it even challenging situations, all of that are working for us and never against us. So typically the false ego is created from a place of lack, fear, and ignorance. So when we remove ourselves from this ignorance and accept that everything is working for us, we can work with this idea of love and compassion, as well as to gain more confidence and clarity in our life. And very slowly, this false ego will not have a place to stay in your mind and your body anymore. Finally, we also want to share with you the importance on working on yourself, investing in your personal growth, and accepting and having more compassion for yourself. And this includes taking time to do the work, do the inner work, self-reflect, have a daily practice, and be consistent in knowing, in reminding yourself every day that who you are, who is this person at the very core. And by committing to a regular routine, we can also help to simplify our life, because we don't have to worry about decision fatigue, worrying about what should I do now in this morning, how should I reply to this person and expect something out of them, and just creating a sense of structure and purpose and clarity. So we are also linking this back to the very first episode where we talk about heart-centered intention. When you know your heart-centered intention, when you know who you are, you will be able to simplify life and live on this earth with so much joy and bliss.
Okay, thank you, Candice, for these 3 tips. And as we slowly wrap up this episode, we want to remind you that life is not about constantly gaining more or doing more. Life can be anything it is for you. It's very personal. But our take here is that it's important to tune back into the depth of who we truly are, releasing ourselves from misidentifications on every level. And to do that, we need to work on ourselves, be patient, and calm down the mind, allow the ego self to take the back seat and not rule our life. But the truth is that the ego itself is not the problem. The illusion of self is the problem. So if we, just like on this lake, gently move away all of these illusions and look deep within, we may see the pure consciousness that lies at the bottom, at the core of it all. And we can start understanding a little bit more about ourselves, about our lives, a little bit more about our relationships with others. We can start understanding that, again, it's not about gaining more, but maybe about doing less, allowing ourselves to do less and rest in this soft space where we don't have to constantly prove anything. We don't have to constantly achieve these new goals that we thought that are ours. Just look deeper within. We hope that all of that serves as food for thought. It's a very wide topic and we are not able to grasp the depth of it in one episode, but we hope that this discussion serves its purpose. It's not about the philosophies, but about embodiment and about your own personal experience. So let us know your thoughts and feel free to ask questions. We would love to hear from you. You can get in touch with us via our Instagram or our website at Our Heart @space.
Yes, and we would also love for you to join us in the next full moon gathering that's happening in June. So once again, be on our newsletter to be the first to know once registrations are opened. And finally, if you enjoy this podcast, if you love this episode, please share this with your friends and drop us a review and chat with us. We would love to know your thoughts. Thank you.
From our hearts to yours.
Thank you for listening.